Major advertising companies set up what they called operating groups to try and work out how to appeal to these new individuals. The head of one agency sent a memo to all staff. We must conform, he told them, to the new nonconformists. We must listen to the music of Bobby Dylan and go to the theatre more. But the problem was, few of the self-expressive individuals would take part in focus groups. The advertisers were left to their own devices.
There's a new cereal that tastes so right. Makes you dance, it's a way out of sight. It's tasty little squares of malted wheat. It's crispy and it's crunchy and it tastes so neat. Faster though.
That's what I'm saying. Use a folk rock with more rock than folk.
And there was an even more serious problem. To make products for people who wanted to express themselves would mean creating variety. But the systems of mass production that had been developed in America were only profitable if they made large numbers of the same objects. This had fitted perfectly with the limited range of desires of a conformist society. The expressive self threatened this whole system of manufacture. And the threat was about to grow rapidly.
Go!
Because an entrepreneur had invented a way of mass-producing this new independent self. He was called Werner Erhard.
Some of the stuff that we traditionally think of as being in your mind is actually in the world, because you're moving to that too.
Erhard had invented a system called EST, Erhard Seminar Training. Hundreds of people came for weekend sessions to be taught how to be themselves. And EST was soon copied by other groups, like Exegesis in Britain. Many of Erhard's techniques came from the human potential movement, but he criticised the movement for not having gone far enough. Their idea that there was a central core inside all human beings was, he said, just another limitation on human freedom. In reality, there was no fixed self, which meant that you could be anything that you wanted to be.
The thesis of the human potential movement was that there was something really good down in there. And if you took these layers off, what you were going to wind up with was a kernel, a something that was innately self-expressive, that was the true self, that was going to be a wonderful thing. In actuality, you found people who'd gone to the last layer and took off the last layer and found that what was left was nothing.
All right, push! Move! Do it!
The EST sessions were intense and often brutal. The participants signed contracts agreeing not to leave and to allow the trainers to do anything they thought necessary to break down their socially constructed identities.
You're going to get sandwiched in there. Push! Go for a win! If I push harder than you do, I'm going to squash you. So you better push fast. Now, hard, do it! That's it, do it again! Push! Good! 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 Again! Yes!
The real point to the EST training was to go down through layer after layer after layer after layer until you got to the last layer and peeled it off, where the recognition was that it's really all meaningless and empty. Now, that's existentialism's endpoint. EST went a step further in that people began to recognize that it was not only meaningless and empty, but it was empty and meaningless that it was empty and meaningless. And in that there's an enormous freedom. All the constrictions, all of the rules you've placed on yourself are gone. And what you're left with is nothing. And nothing is an extraordinarily powerful place to stand, because it is only from nothing that you can create. And from this nothing, people were able to invent a life, and allowing them to create themselves.
Invent themselves.
Invent themselves. You can be what you want to be.
I want you to start to make that sound, and on that sound, create and people the world the way you want to create it.
What Earhart did was to say that only the individual matters, that there is no societal concern, that you living a fulfilled life is all you need be concerned about. Est people came out of those trainings feeling that it wasn't selfish to think about yourself, it was your highest duty.
So kiss me and smile for me, tell me that you'll wait for me, hold me like you never let me go.
The training is 2 weekends. And it was quite an incredible experience in my life. I'll forever be grateful for the experience. I got a great deal out of it. We really want to know who we are. There are things going on. We learn more and more about ourselves all the time. And to really find out what it is that makes us tick and how we are discovering ourselves.
I'm leaving.
Est became hugely successful. Singers, film stars, and hundreds of thousands of ordinary Americans underwent the training in the 1970s. But in the process, the political idea that had begun the movement for personal transformation began to disappear. The original vision had been that through discovering and expressing the self, a new culture would be born, one that would challenge the power of the state.
We will not let them separate our culture from our politics. We are a people. We are all together.
But what was now emerging was the idea that people could be happy simply within themselves, and that changing society was irrelevant. One of the proponents of this was Jerry Rubin. In 1968, Rubin, as leader of the Yippies, had led the march on Chicago, but now he had undergone S training.
I was willing to die, and I had a martyr complex in a sense. I think we all did. And I've given up that ideal of sacrifice. And I'm not as overwhelmingly moved by injustice as I was. And now we reincarnated ourselves from within.
Basically, the politics were lost and totally replaced by this lifestyle. And then the desire to become deeper and deeper into the self. By now, a grandiose sense of the self. And my a good friend and one of the original Yippie founders, Jerry Rubin, definitely moved in that direction. And I think he was beginning to buy into the notion that he could be happy and fully self-developed on his own. Socialism in one person.
Yes. Was he alone in that trajectory?
Although that, of course, is capitalism.
That's the whole joke. I think it's funny. I think it's funny because people spend so much of their life being bedeviled by their past and being locked into their past and being limited by their past. And there's an enormous freedom from that. Letting people create themselves.
Est was only the most vivid and intense expression of an idea that was spreading rapidly through all strata of American society. Books and television programs promoted the idea that one's first duty was to be oneself. And those monitoring this shift were astonished at the speed with which the idea was spreading.
In 1970, it was a small percentage of the total population, maybe 3 to 5%. By 1980, it had spread to the vast majority of the public, up to 80%.
You asked the question, how do you get self-actualized? You take this day and you say, when I shave every morning, I look in that mirror, I say to myself, I really say this, I say, nobody is going to ruin this day for you, Wayne Dyer, nobody.
That this preoccupation with the self and the inner self traveled and spread throughout the society in the 1970s.
It helped me to stop living in the past and start building from today and using my experiences in a positive way to be a better person today and tomorrow.
But then the problem comes, well, how do you be self-expressive?